Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating the traditional hexagon motif. You can find a link to the written pattern in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. Let's begin. I'll be using Lion Brand's Vanna's Choice and a furrows hook, and this is what the traditional hexagon motif looks like when it's all done. That's what I'll be demonstrating today. Let me set this one aside. Okay, to begin the traditional hexagon motif, we're going to start with a chain 6. So I'll start with a slip knot, put that on my hook there, and you always want to make sure that the short end is the one facing you. From there, we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we slip stitch in the furthest chain from the hook, the first one we made, to create a ring, and that's where we'll begin row 1, or rather round 1, since we're working in the round. There we go. Got my slip stitch and I've got my ring. Now, working into the ring, I'll make a beginning cluster. The beginning cluster for this pattern is chain 2, 1, 2, and then a double crochet 2 together. So we yarn over, go into the ring itself, pull up a loop, pull through 2, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over again, go back into that ring, pull up another loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Then with 3 loops left on the hook, we yarn over and pull through all 3. And that's our beginning cluster. From there, we chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. Then we make a regular cluster. In this case, for this pattern, that regular cluster is a double crochet 3 together, all worked into the same space. Since we're in round 1, it's the ring. So let's do that together. We're going to go into the ring again, pull up a loop, pull through 2, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over again, go back into that ring, pull up our loop, pull through 2, yarn over again, one more time into the ring, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and then we've got 4 loops left on the hook, 3 half double crochets made, so to speak, not the stitch half double crochet, that was confusing. 3 double crochets that are only half done is what I should have said. 4 loops on the hook, we yarn over and pull through all 4 loops, and that's our standard cluster. So the chain 3 and the cluster is our repeat that we'll do 5 times around, so that in the end, including the beginning cluster, we'll have a total of 6 clusters. So let's do that again. Chain 3 and make another cluster right into the ring. We start 1 double crochet, stop with 2 loops, start a second double crochet, stop with 3 loops, start a third double crochet, stop with 4 loops, yarn over, and pull through all 4. Get that little end out of the way here. If you like to, you can crochet over that end and use it to help tighten up that initial ring if you want to, but you don't have to for this. So let's do our repeat again. Chain 3. We always have chain 3 between our clusters here in round 1. So then we make another cluster. It's just 3 double crochets that are all finished off at the same time, like so. So far we've got 4 clusters. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 2 more to go. 1, 2, 3. Go back into that ring. Make our next cluster here. And you can rewind and watch the slower version of that again if you need to. Just for the sake of time here, I'm going to go ahead and make them a little quicker. We'll chain 3. This is our last repeat. If you're looking at the written pattern, this is the section inside the brackets. Chain 3, cluster 5 times. That's what we're doing right now. Oops, I took too many loops on that one, so I'll push it back over. There we go. There we go. Now we've got our 6 clusters. Let me pull that end out of the way a little bit here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So rather than chaining 3 and joining up here, because I want to end up in the middle of that chain space, we're going to do a little trick. We're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a half double crochet in the top of the beginning cluster. So I'll go right in there, work our half double crochet, and you can see that lands me right in the middle of what counts as a chain 3 space. Visually, this is going to look the same as the other chain 3 spaces, only we know we made it a little differently right there. So that's round 1. I would weave in that end, of course, when I'm all done, so I get a nice round circle in the middle, and then begin round 2. To begin round 2, we begin with another beginning cluster. We're going to chain 2 and work a double crochet 2 together. Remember, because this is our beginning cluster, that chain 2 kind of acts as the first partial double crochet for our beginning cluster here. And I'm going to work this one right into this space right here beneath the chain 1 and half double crochet. So I make my double crochet 2 together for our beginning cluster, and then from there I'm going to chain 3, 2, 3, and work another cluster in the next chain 3 space here. In the next chain space, we work a cluster here, followed by a chain 3 and another cluster. And that's what we're going to do in each of these chain 3 spaces. So we've got our cluster, chain 3, and then we do another cluster right back in that same chain 3 space. So in round 2, each of the chain 3s will have a cluster, chain 3, cluster worked inside it. But then we also need to remember that part of the repeat is to chain 3 before we move to the next chain 3 space. So that's what we've done here. Cluster, chain 3, cluster, chain 3. We come to the next one, and we work another pair of clusters with chain 3 in between. So cluster, chain 3, and cluster again. 2 and 3. There we have it. So we've got our increase there. We're ready to move to the next one, but first, chain 3. Those chain 3s are super important. If you miss a chain 3, you will want to go back, frog it, pull your work out, and put it back in there. That's not an easy one to fudge later. So that's one cluster for this space, 2, 3 chains, another cluster right back in that same space. And like so, there we are. And there we have the cluster, chain 3 cluster for that one. We've got 2 more chain 3s to go before we end up back at that chain 1 half double crochet, and that one of course will be treated a little bit differently. So let's keep going. We chain 3 before we move on to the next space. Make our cluster like so, followed by, of course, a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. You may have noticed I tend to choke up on my chains with my non-hook hand. That, for me, helps keep my chains a little more even. I like to use my left hand quite a bit when I crochet, as I'm right-handed normally, my non-hook hand, to help guide where my yarn goes. I just find it a little easier, actually quite a bit easier. You may crochet a little bit differently, and that's okay. As long as you're getting the stitches you want, unlike what I just did, as long as you're getting the stitches you want and the look you want and your hands don't hurt, then you're doing fine. So we've got a cluster there, chain 3 again, 2, 3. Make our last cluster for this chain 3 space. This does follow the basic rules for circles, where you're usually working twice as many in the second round, if you're familiar with that. So that makes it a little easier to remember too. So we've got our 2 clusters in each of the spaces. We're back at the chain 1 half double crochet space that we began in with our beginning cluster. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and chain 3 one more time. And then I'm going to work a regular cluster back in that same space we began in, the chain 1 half double crochet space. So let me get that one made here. And then to finish off this one so that it matches the others, we're going to do the same little trick. Chain 1, make it a nice and tall chain 1, don't make it a little stingy tight one. And then make a half double crochet in the top of that one right there, the beginning cluster. And again, you'll kind of want to pull the loop up a little higher so that you end up nice and in the middle there, so that you're ready from here to begin round 3. To begin round 3, we begin with a beginning cluster in that same chain 1 half double crochet space. which is of course chain 2, and then go back in that space and make a double crochet 2 together. 1 and 2, and there we have that one. The round 3 is where it gets a little bit more complicated, so you'll want to be sure to check the written instructions for this one too as you work. So from after our beginning cluster, we hit our brackets. It's a chain 3, cluster, chain 3, and cluster in the next space, followed by 1 cluster in the next space. So we've still got our chain 3s in between. Let me go ahead and demo that. We are going to start with our chain 3, and then in the next space I'll work a cluster, our standard one of course. We're not beginning a row, so we just work a regular double crochet 3 together, but all worked into that same space there. That's what makes it a cluster. Then we chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3, and then we work another cluster right in that same chain 3 space, like so. Put a little bit more yarn there. There we go. And then we chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3, and work just 1 cluster in this space. So we're increasing again, but not as quickly. We're only going to work the 2 clusters in every other chain 3 space. So this space only gets 1 cluster, but we still want to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, before we head to the next one. There was 1 in this one, so there will be 2 in this one. Start with 1 cluster, like so, and then chain 3, and then our second cluster. And this is where you'll see things start changing from a circle, which is essentially what we were making before, into the hexagon shape. So there's our next cluster there. So we chain 3 again before we can move on, and because this one had 2, this one will just have 1. So got 2 and 3, there we have it. 1 cluster there, so we chain 3 again and head to the next chain 3 space. I think you get the idea on this round, so I'm going to go ahead and work to the end of the round. I'll see you when we start approaching again that space where we worked our beginning cluster. Okay, so here we are almost at the end of round 3. You can see, let me put my hook up out of the way here a little bit so I can show you. We started off with our beginning cluster, then we had 2 in the next space, 1 in the next space, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and 2, all the way around, making sure we've got a chain 3 in between each of those clusters. And what I remember what I said was you'd be able to start seeing the hexagon shape a little bit, and if I pull on those corners where we've got the 2 a little bit, you can start seeing it's turning into a hexagon. So I'll stick my hook right back in that loop. Oops, it's going the wrong direction. Let's try that again. And then from here, we're going to use that same close again, that little trick to make us end up back in the middle of that space. We'll chain 1 and work a half double crochet in the top of the beginning cluster, like so. And then we're all set for round 4. Round 4 begins with a chain 3. This is going to count as our first double crochet. Now, if you prefer to use a different method to replace your chain or to replace a chain 3, for instance, some people like the chainless starting double crochet or a chain 2 and don't count it as the first double crochet, that's up to you. For the sake of time here, I'm just going to chain 3 and do it sort of the standard method and count that as our first double crochet. Because in this round, we're not going to be working clusters, we're just going to be working standard double crochets. So from here, I'm going to double crochet right back in that chain 1 half double crochet space. And then from here, I'm going to skip the cluster and work 3 double crochets in the next chain space. 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to move to the next chain 3 space. This chain 3 space is in between 2 clusters. So this is going to be another corner for us here. So what we're going to do is work 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, and then we chain 2, 1, 2, and work 3 double crochets right back in that same space. 1, 2, and 3. Oops, I made a cluster, didn't I? We're supposed to be finishing those. Let's do that again. I'm so used to making clusters now after there's first 3 rows. So 1 double crochet. We're finishing these all the way through. 2 double crochets and 3 double crochets. And that is going to be our corner that we're going to work whenever we come to a chain 3 space that is in between 2 clusters that are worked in the same space. So by reading your previous row, you'll be able to see a lot easier what to do in this row, even without the instructions in front of you. So we go to the next chain 3 space. It's not between 2 clusters that are worked into the same space, so we just work 3 double crochets in here. Remember, these are 3 double crochets, not a cluster. I'm saying that for myself as much as for you. So we've got our 3 double crochets there. We go to the next one. This is not a corner, so we just work 3 double crochets again. 1, 2, and 3. We move to the next one. It is a corner. You can see it's got 2 worked into the same space, so we'll make another corner here. That's our 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, followed by a chain 2 and 3 more right back in that same space. 1, 2, and 3. And you can see that that's what each side of our hexagon is going to look like. We've got a corner worked into essentially a corner, and then in the in-between spaces where there's not a corner, where there's not 2 clusters worked into one space, you just have 3 double crochets. And that's what we're going to continue to do all the way around. So I'll see you at the end of this row. All right, so I've come to the end of round 4. You can see that last chain 3 space I ran into was a corner. So I put my 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets in there. I'm right back at that beginning chain 1 half double crochet space where we began. So to finish that off, because we had our chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, plus our double crochet, I need a third one there, don't I? So I'm just going to go ahead and put one more in there. And then I can either join right to that top of that chain 3 if I want to continue working, turn it into a bigger pattern, maybe add a row of single crochet to firm up the edges a little more if I wanted to, or I could break the yarn and finish that off. Just depends on what I want to do with my hexagon. So that is the traditional hexagon. Let's take another look at it all finished here. Here's the finished one with a nice firm hexagon shape. This hasn't been blocked or anything. This is all just from the stitching. So if you wanted your edges a little straighter, you could block it. Just depends what you want to do with your traditional hexagon. It's great for rugs, in a thinner yarn. You could make garments out of it, blankets, of course, whatever you like. I hope you've enjoyed this pattern. Once again, check the link in the description for the written out pattern. And thank you so much for watching.